Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Future is Bilingual podcast. My name is Heather. Thank you for joining me today. It feels really good to be back recording the podcast and releasing episodes because I took a bit of a hiatus to finish my coursework for my PhD. Now I finally have time to dedicate to the things I love, like this podcast. So today's episode is with my good friend Heidi, who I met on Instagram. She is also a fellow podcaster now, and we do talk about her podcast near the end. So there are already 8 episodes. We did record this interview back in January with the hope that it would be published before her podcast came out, and life got in the way. So you'll have plenty to catch up on if you don't already listen to Heidi's wonderful podcast about learning and loving languages. She is a multilingual mom who's raising 2 multilingual kids abroad. They lived in Italy and now more recently Germany, but she started learning languages later in her life. So she tells us all about that journey. We also talk about just dealing with expectations, how we can kind of transform the way that we see language learning, and her experiences being an expat and getting out of that expat bubble, and how languages are such a great bonding factor in between different generations and just people in general. So really can't wait for you to hear this talk, and let's get right to it. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Future is Bilingual podcast. Today, tonight, tomorrow, Heidi and I are recording this over 2 different time zones where it's nighttime for me and morning for her. So welcome, Heidi.
I'm excited to be here.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, where you live, who's in your family.
All right. I am Heidi, and I am originally from Kentucky, born and raised, and I currently live in Germany. Although this summer we just moved from Italy, where we lived for 4 years. So we've been living kind of the expat life for a while now. And when I say we, I mean my husband, me, and our 2 children, who are currently 5 and 9 years old. So I am 37 years old. And with respect to languages, only started learning when we moved to Italy in 2017. So well, other than high school Spanish and college Spanish, my only language experience is moving to Italy, getting there and going to Duolingo and saying, how do I say hello? How do I say good morning? How do I say thank you? And that began my whole journey.
Wow. So you didn't start before moving?
No, I didn't. And I was
thinking
thinking about
this.
Did
you were moving? Did you guys have
We
prior?
did. We had, so I think we found out officially in April, and then we moved in July of the same year. And of course, that process, my son was 1 at the time. So that process itself is we had to get passports for all of us. So I think I had my tourist passport, but then we had to get official passports because we're moving for my husband's job. And then, the packing up of the house, we had to sell our house because we owned it at the time. And I was just so focused on moving. And I also thought that we're moving to Italy. I'm going to learn Italian. Immersion. That's how to do it, right?
Right.
I had this false sense of security, really, that I was just going to learn it. And we knew we were going to put the kids in Italian schools over the years. So it just seemed like it was going to happen. And then the whole story is how this unfolds, really, how I started learning the language and made all the mistakes and everything. But yeah, I mean, I literally remember getting to the hotel, being completely, sleep deprived, hadn't slept all night on the plane, and trying to figure out what app to use. And of course, Duolingo came up, and the first lesson was Buongiorno. And I was like, okay, I can do that. So we went next door to the hotel was a supermarket. We went, and I remember saying Buongiorno to like everyone I saw, because I'm from Kentucky. We say hi to everyone on the street. Doesn't matter. You make eye contact, you say hi. So I had these little old ladies looking at me like, okay, we don't do that, like looking away, this weird person. But I'd say Buongiorno and ciao and grazie. And I was so in it. Saying all the greetings.
But that's great that you jumped right in. You weren't afraid to speak, because so many, I think, adults, even if they have language learning experience or not, like regardless, we are afraid to speak. We're afraid to actually use it. We'll do the whole Duolingo tree, the whole, app, what they offer for a language, but we won't.
Yeah.
We're afraid to speak it. And, even more so to a native speaker. I think, there's this whole fear that like, they're going to judge me. My accent's wrong. I'm not going to say this correctly. I'm going to wait until I know everything before I open my mouth. I think a lot of us, not me, but I know a lot of people have that fear. So you personally, you didn't feel that fear. You just immediately started talking.
In the beginning, yes, but so it took, I don't know, a month and a half, I think, to get a house. And then from there, we got into the house in the end of August, which everything in Italy is basically shut down in August at some point or another, right? So we started 2 weeks later when my daughter went to the Scuola Materna, the preschool. That's when we started kind of integrating a little bit with the community. And that's when I realized I have to say more. And my neighbor was also, she was married to an American, but she's Italian. So she was able to come with me and translate anyway. But the whole
that's great.
registering my daughter for the Scuola Materna, I did that all on my own. And there happened to be a woman who worked there who spoke a little English, but that was an experience. But once we really started getting into the community, seeing the same people every day, seeing the same moms every day, that's when I really started to feel overwhelmed with it and scared of talking, because I would say something and then the person wouldn't understand me. And I had no idea about the differences between regional word usage, not even dialect, just word usage, how they say certain phrases. It's different depending on where you go. So whatever, Duolingo, for example, says ragazzo for boy, but they all use bambino because they were young kids. So just little things like that I would say something, they'd be like, what are you talking about? And
they're not seeing un ragazzo, they're seeing exactly. Un bambino. Yeah, even that's funny. Just that I just saw a post. This is totally kind of random, but they were saying there's no word for toddler in Italian. So even just the way that languages will divide up the ages of life, like we have a word for this thing that's not a baby, that's not a child, it's this in between.
And bambino can go for years. I mean, like I still say my bambini for both of my kids. My daughter's 9 now. And I don't know if there's
we wouldn't say that
maybe when they go to middle school.
For us is like a baby, like you're holding.
Right. Yes.
And then there's a toddler and then there's a child and it's a girl, it's a boy, so
exactly. Maybe when they go to middle school, maybe that's when they kind of naturally make the switch. I don't know. We didn't get that far.
That's so interesting. Which part of Italy were you guys?
We were in the north, in the Veneto region. And it's the perfect location. It's like an hour from Venice. There's Asiago to the north, Milan to the west, Florence is not too far in the south, south of Vicenza where we were. So many countries within like a 4-hour drive.
Right. Not to mention Europe, you can just easily hop on a train and
plane. Oh,
let's not talk about this. I might start crying.
I'm gonna get hungry.
Voglio piangere. I don't want to start crying.
So where was I? Oh, so being afraid of speaking. Once I realized that people don't understand me, that's when I really started to feel very vulnerable. And I mostly used Duolingo. I started listening to music. I listened to Laura Pausini forever because my Italian teacher recommended her. And I took 2 classes that were in English, but Italian as a second language courses. So I learned, vocabulary, verb conjugation in the present and the passato prossimo over the course of, 6 to 8 months. And then at that point, we had been there for a year. So I started feeling this pressure that I should be able to do this. And especially with my daughter's teachers, because they spoke no English. And one of them was, bless her heart, this older woman who's like a grandma, loves the kids, but very strict. And she wouldn't really try very hard to understand me. The other teacher, I couldn't, if I didn't conjugate a verb, she as long as it said me, I'm the one doing this. If I don't know how to, she'd be like, okay, it's fine. And she'd understand. The other woman was very strict about her ideology of how I should be learning, how fast I should be learning and speaking.
I just want to point
not just
out
learning, just speaking.
You're Kentuckian. Bless her heart. Bless her heart. I'm going to say something bad about this person. But regional thing of the South. We would not do that. We wouldn't say that in the North, but that's funny.
As long as you say bless her heart, you can say anything about them.
That's so great.
But I would get so intimidated around her and very nervous and really felt like I should be speaking by now. I should be able to do all of this. And it was, of course, completely unrealistic, but it was very, I don't know the right word. It was time-based. I've been here for this many months now. What should I be able to do without, and by the way, I also had restarted learning my master's degree. I had put that on pause while we moved, and we moved in July. In January, I started classes again, and I had 2 young ones.
A toddler,
yeah. My youngest wasn't going to daycare yet. And when my oldest started primary school, she went to preschool for 1 year and then started primary school. Primary school, she went part-time. So she got off school at like 1:30 or so every day. So I had kind of fewer hours to myself to get all this stuff done.
Which is not a lot. You can't get anything done with kids. Let's just put that out there. This is a parenting podcast. We all know you can't get anything done with the young kids. So.
Yes. And so then that kind of is a perfect segue into this next thought that I've had in hindsight, of course, is that I started saying, okay, well, what have other people done to learn Italian or to learn languages? So I have a friend in Dueville where we lived, and she's Tunisian. She moved there, I think 8 years prior, speaks amazing Italian. My other Italian friends have said she's just flawless. Okay.
Wow.
So I know the
pressure.
standard. And I said, okay, how did you learn? How long did it take you to learn Italian? I think I'd been there about a year when we had this conversation. And she said, well, at about 6 months, I went to the doctor by myself. And I felt like that I was good then. And I was like, oh, well, that was a long time ago for me. So 6 months isn't it? Okay. How did you learn? She said she'd sit around and watch Peppa Pig all day or soap operas. And I said, great. She didn't have kids at that time. She did when we had this conversation, she didn't have kids. So that's a whole other level of time that I didn't have. And I said, okay, well, that's not going to work for me. Then I realized she was a native Arabic and French speaker. So she already had that layer as well. She's already bilingual and a Romance language.
Yes,
so
that's
can't
super
compare
helpful.
Can't compare myself to you. Okay, let's pick someone else and just kind of keep searching for people who are adult language learners, preferably with kids. So I think I actually had found you on Instagram, and I was like, oh, she's learning Polish. It's not her native language. She's got kids. Oh, she already speaks French and Spanish, and her husband's Polish. So trying to not compare myself to other people, but find someone with a similar story and say, what did you do? But that just goes back to wanting some magic solution. I wanted immersion. I wanted it to just go into my head.
And even if you found that person, let's say you found a person who had a very similar situation, moved to a country, had to learn the language, maybe it wasn't Italian, it was another language. Even so, like what worked for them wouldn't necessarily work for you, even in the same circumstances, even with the same age kids, same, type of language, the same everything.
So
I
didn't have different teachers, or you learn in
not
different
that it's
ways,
not fascinating. I mean, this whole podcast is about how it's completely fascinating to hear everybody's stories and how they're raising their kids and how they're, their own multilingual journeys. It's interesting, but it's not going to per se, help what you're trying to do. Unfortunately, there's no magic bullet that we can all take.
Unfortunately, just want to put the German language into my head.
I would love to download a couple languages into my head.
But the pressure really, really, really built up, and I was making progress. Of course, I was learning new languages. I will never forget the first time I overheard a different conversation and knew what they were talking about in Italian, and it was something very bland and basic, but I was like, those were words in there. That was not just one long sentence of sound. Those were actual words. And I was so excited, going
eavesdropping. It's one of my favorite pastimes when I was traveling. What language are they speaking?
Going to the hairdresser for the first time and having a 45-minute conversation. My head hurt so bad at the end, and I used Google Translate often, but most of it I did by myself. Like these little kind of stepping stones, milestones along the way were huge. And I didn't even realize it at the time because I had no idea how to learn a language. I didn't know that there was a community of people out there doing this. I had no idea that there were podcasts dedicated to it. I didn't even listen to podcasts at the time. And so I was very alone in all of it. Really
just want to say,
yes,
on that note of having a headache, I also remember the very first time that we took a trip with my university. We went up to Montreal for the day, and it was the first time, even though I had taken French in high school and I was taking, I was majoring in French at college. It was the first time that I spent an entire day immersed speaking
and Canadian French,
listening to French. It's also different, but just the fact of thinking in a foreign language for that long. I had a headache at the end of that day.
Oh yeah.
And that was the first time that I was immersed in French. And I've heard so many people say that that's like a common thing, that your head physically hurts from having to think so much. And that first time, but it's a muscle. It gets used to it. It's not going to be like that forever. But I also had that experience.
an Italian friend who speaks fluent English and German. And we went to their house one evening really early on. I was just kind of starting to learn Italian. So the whole evening was in English. And it was about 9 or 10 o'clock at night. We'd all had some wine and she just looked really tired. And she started speaking in German because German for her was stronger than English. And we just looked at her and she's like, oh, that wasn't the right language, was it? And it was the first time I had that realization that just because someone is fluent in a language does not mean that their brain can just on demand function. I have Italian friends who speak amazing English with no accent, but every now and then they still get tripped up or too tired or something. And I understand that on a very deep level now. It provides so much more patience in a conversation with someone to realize
and
that.
Emotions, if you're like angry or you're frustrated or flustered, like it just trips you up and it makes it much more harder to think. Like, you know, if someone starts to, I don't know, if you're getting in a fight with somebody, you know, even with my husband, if we can speak Polish, but then if we start to argue, I just switch to English because I'm like, I need to say what I want to say and I want to say it correctly and with the right intonation and everything that comes along with all those emotions.
Right.
It's hard to do that. It's hard to control that.
And my husband, because his job is all in English, he worked with Americans. He didn't have to learn Italian. And of course, when he started working, he didn't really have time or passion. So it wasn't for him. And he picked up a little bit, of course, while we're there. But often, especially when my Italian was getting better and we would have people over who maybe didn't speak English. There's always someone else who spoke English. So he would always have someone to socialize with, but he would always be looking at me. What are they saying? What are they saying? I'm like, I'm not a translator, but you're responding. I'm like, I understand, but translating is a completely different thing. Like I can follow along and respond appropriately and still not be able to, you can ask me what they said and I'll be like, I don't know, but I did know. You know, it's just, I just can't do this for you. And he did not understand that too. So there's another level of patience I have. And where we live now, it's so international. You always meet people who don't speak your language or something. And either being aware of the people in the room who don't understand and simultaneously not expecting someone else to translate is an interesting dynamic and respect for the whole conversation too, that I would have never been aware of if I hadn't had these experiences.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people can relate to what you're saying, just how you can understand something, but not know the word for word translation, or you forget what language someone said something to you in. Like people will ask, like, well, what did he just say? And I'm like, wait, that wasn't English? Like you didn't understand that?
Yes.
But you're like,
my daughter,
it's over your head by that point. Like you've forgotten, like I can't translate that anymore.
Yes. My daughter's best friend speaks only Italian, and we were all walking home part of the way together. They said bye, they said some stuff, and we got home and I said, wait a second, did she say that in English? My daughter's like, no, Mom, she doesn't speak English. And I was like, I swear my brain heard that in English, but it was that realization that, I understood. And I don't know what language it was. I mean, it had to have been Italian. It's the only way, but yeah.
It's a cool feeling though.
When you're like, well,
I don't even know what language is happening anymore.
Yeah.
So remind us, how old was your daughter when you arrived in Italy, and how old was she when you guys left?
When we arrived, she was 4.5. And when we left, she was 8.5. So we basically say that her childhood was in Italy, because before that she was born in New York. Then we moved to Maryland, and then we moved to Kansas for a year, and then we moved to Georgia, and then Italy. So even that first 4 years, she had so many homes. So
her first memories are in Italy. Wow. And how was her Italian?
It was really good. So of course she picked it up fast-ish because she had a lot of social anxiety when we got there and got her into the school. And it was something I didn't anticipate, because we told her, you're going to go to Italian school, and she'd go around telling everyone, I'm going to go to Italian school. I know the word for butterfly and I can count to 3. And I was like, oh, she's going to rock this. This is going to be so great. But then dropping her off the first day and realizing that she didn't understand what that meant. She didn't understand that it meant she would be in a class for 7 hours a day with people who did not understand her and who she didn't understand. And she's always been, at least at that point, clingy to me. I mean, I was a stay-at-home mom, so I was what she knew all the time. So leaving me for that amount of time and not being able to communicate was really hard on her. And we lived right next to the school. So our property bordered the school. So when the kids played outside, so many days I would see her over there at the fence just going, mommy, mommy.
Oh my gosh,
and
that's heartbreaking.
Broke my heart. But I knew that I had to just watch and let her be, or go somewhere else so I didn't have to watch, but just let her be.
I would be taking a walk far, far away from the school.
It was so, well, if I go outside, she would see me. So I just go and stay in the house. But eventually girls started coming over and just kind of like gently grabbing her and wanting to play with her. There was always a teacher there to console her. So watching these interactions was neat. And they start school.
Gosh. I can't imagine. I don't see my kids. We don't border with their daycare. And my God, I don't know if I could handle watching that. I mean, you would have to though. Like you'd have to. It's right there. Exactly. I don't think I could not watch it, but
exactly. Wow. Well, when my son started a few years later, he was just like, okay, I'm good. Leave me alone, mom. No problem.
That's how my son is too.
Yeah. School starts in September, mid-September there. And then of course, Christmas break in December. And during that time, we really saw, I think the only, I don't want to say improvement, but the only progress I guess I saw in her was she could count, she could say some colors, and she didn't get mad when I would attempt to speak Italian with her. Or we could read a short book together if it was an interactive book where you like pull things out or something. So she would let me do that. Then coming back from Christmas break, she had the flu for a week, couldn't go back to school. And for some reason, that was the switch. She wanted to go to school because she could see her friends there from our property, but she was sick and she couldn't. So when she did return, it was like automatic. All these girls came out of the classroom and just hugged her, and she went in. And after that, she was more or less good. And that's when she started opening up her mind to the language, really.
It's probably good that she had that little break.
Yes.
Get that desire back.
Yes. And we could see the school. So she could see, the girls over there playing together. And so that was an interesting year. And she went to primary school for 3 years there. And I don't know if the entire Italian school system is like this, but in our town and area for primary school, you have the same class and the same teacher all 5 years.
Oh, wow.
We unfortunately had the experience that we did not like her teacher, and her teacher the students were afraid of her. So there was another level of anxiety in learning the language, was that she had a teacher who she was scared of. And looking back, I'm amazed at how much my daughter learned just from being in that environment where she didn't want to go every day because of that teacher, but her best friend was in her class. And that is probably where she learned the most of the language. And then when she started learning grammar, articles and verb conjugation, she did okay, but I would see the mistakes she would make. And because I'm not a teacher, I had a hard time helping her with her homework. It's just like, this is the rule. This is the rule. Come on. Why aren't you getting this? And, or whenever you're doing the passato prossimo, do you use essere or avere? She gets it wrong, and she still does, but I had to.
I still do too.
Oh yeah. Right. So do I. She did amazing. And over time, I finally calmed myself down and realized that we knew we would be moving. We knew we weren't stay there forever. So the goal of this whole putting her in Italian school was not that she learned Italian perfectly. It was that we set a foundation of language learning that when she decides she wants to keep or learn Italian, she already has this foundation that she's never going to lose. She has the friends, and that's motivation enough for her to keep going. And when she really gets to school age where she can learn the rules, and read on her, which she can read on her own now in Italian, that's a whole other interesting story too. When she can do her own things, find her own podcast, find her own stuff, right. She already has this thing that my husband and I didn't have. We weren't bilingual. We weren't, we didn't have access to language really. Well, he did. That's another story. So anyway, that was the goal.
I think the peers, though, we can't underestimate how important peers are. You can send the kids to school, but if they're not speaking with friends, then they're not really going to learn. Exactly. I just have a quick question because
sure.
The essere avere is very similar to the être and avoir in French.
Okay.
And how do I want to formulate this question? So native speakers probably don't make errors with that. And I feel like the same thing is going to happen with my kids. So my son is the same age. He's 4.5, going to French school in Quebec, and he's, having to learn French. Unfortunately, he has friends at his daycare that are English speakers, so he just gravitates towards the Anglophones. So I don't think he's learning as much as your daughter probably was, because he has this English to fall back on. But I just wonder if you were like worried, because I find myself worrying that he's going to make mistakes that a native French speaker would not. Like next year, he has to start school. He's going to be 5. I'm curious personally, as a parent of a kid who's going to start, regular school next year, how they were treated, because that's also my research interest for my doctorate, is the population of students that has, we call them allophones, which means their native language is neither French nor English in Canada. And I'm interested in that population. So curious, this is out of curiosity. Like, did you see that your daughter was treated differently? Because she's going to obviously make grammar mistakes that a native is going to just never make, because it doesn't sound correct.
There are two different ways to answer this, I think. So the first is socially, of course, she seemed good for the most part, because she had her best friend who was always patient with her, didn't care that she couldn't speak perfect, they just played and talked and chatted. So because of that friendship, I think my daughter was already kind of accepted in the bigger group. And once they got to primary school, there were a few other students in the class that weren't native Italian speakers. So they were, I think, born in Italy, or at least had moved there from an early age. They didn't have this kind of English speaking expat bubble that we found ourselves in. So of course their experiences were different, but she wasn't different in the same way as if she had been the only English speaker. So socially, she always felt accepted, especially because she had that one best friend. That's all she needed, was one. And where I really worried, because of my own personal tendencies, is with school, because once they got to primary school, they started learning grammar in the classroom, right? So the Italian students do pretty well, because they can just think, oh, would I say sono, or would I say oh here? All right, that's the right answer. And she had to learn grammatically, academically, but she's never learned English grammar. So at least for me, when I was learning Italian grammar, I could compare it to English, or not compare it to English, whichever one worked, and go with it. And it was easier. So because she didn't have that foundation, it was harder. And I am a major perfectionist, especially when it comes to academics, for myself, and wanting that for my daughter, wanting her to make perfect grades and stuff. I just had to obviously just let go of it and just not worry. And that was my biggest worry. And again, we knew we were leaving Italy, so that probably made it easier. If you all think you might stay in Canada for a longer time, that's a different story. But now that we're in Germany, now that we're in Germany, we want to be able to stay longer. We don't know if we can, but I would love it if my kids could just finish off the school here, stay with the same group, so we're thinking kind of longer term. This is
especially that they're older, because I felt the same way. It wasn't painful to move. So if people don't know, we moved about 5 or 6 months ago. My kids are only going to be 3 and 4.5. So again, they don't have friends. They haven't started school. It's a big deal to move away from family, but it wasn't the peer social that you're dealing with now, when you just pulled them out of Italy and they had all their friends. That's a much bigger deal. So I can understand why you'd want to finally kind of just settle, let them do their schooling.
But getting very clear myself on what our language goals were for her, and then what's realistic for her, what she wants to do, because she wanted to go to Italian school here. She wanted to go to German school. We had the option of going to a US American school that's available to us. And we chose to put her in the German school. She had a say in that, because she was 8 when we moved. But letting her know that this is her journey now, kind of giving it over to her while also guiding along the way, it helped me not worry. Because if she's in Italy, she wasn't really old enough to understand or to make that decision herself. Once she started going to the Italian school, made friends, she was good to go. But I still had to kind of guide her into taking some ownership of that language process, be it academically or socially. And at some point they have to meet in the middle. but I had to let go of my worry about grades and be more focused on her mental and emotional well-being. And then of course, pandemic hit. So that's doubling down on that one. And just doing what I can to help her feel supported, as in if she makes a mistake, don't correct her because she's not one who likes to be corrected. Just repeat it in the proper way, not, oh, this is wrong because XYZ, right? Just
That's a very
say it in another way. Use that later, even if in a completely different context, say it so that it's not so obvious that I'm, correcting her. Keep mental note of that. And once I made that switch, my worry went down. And I honestly can't say that her language got better. Maybe it did, but my view of her language got better. My mindset of her language got better. So socially always accepted, wasn't an issue. Here in Germany, we've had a very similar experience with that, and figuring out how to just keep supporting them emotionally above everything. Especially my daughter's a feeling girl. So
it's good to know your child, because like you said, the correction, there's different ways to correct. And there's lots of academic papers even about how teachers should be correcting. And I think it's, your child so well. We know our children better than a teacher. A teacher will get to know our child, but it's not the same. So I think knowing the way your child is going to react to that. Now, quickly, you're Italian. You said that you could hear her making mistakes. So your Italian was better than your
academically.
daughter's.
Yes.
you could hear. Well,
right.
What's the situation like now? You guys just moved to Germany. You're now learning German. What's the situation like? Your kids are both in school, German school?
Well, yes. My son is in kindergarten, which in Germany technically isn't considered school. So I guess it's preschool, that we would say. So my son is in kindergarten, and his experience is very interesting to me because when we left Italy, he'd gone to the preschool for 2 years. One of those years was COVID years, so kind of only half counts. He was learning Italian. He could speak it at an appropriate level for his age. He could understand a lot. He played in it. He was totally comfortable. When we moved here, he wanted to go to German school. No problem. Of course, we're going to do it for you anyway. And he's so comfortable being in an environment where people don't understand him and where he doesn't understand them that it has been no problem. No crying, nothing. He just goes every day and goes in and comes home and tells me, hey, I learned a new word today, or I made a new friend and we played together. And like, if I tell him how to say something, he just repeats it. I'm so jealous of his experience.
And personality-wise, it's so interesting.
Oh, absolutely.
You have these little people and you're like, wow, you get to know their personalities and see that, he just seems to be very, go with the flow. It's fine. I'm comfortable with this not understanding. And some people are so uncomfortable if they don't understand every single word. I had a student once who would translate every single word on any paper I gave him. He would write it in English. He translated every single thing word for word. Took him forever to finish tests because he would literally translate the entire test.
Oh, yes.
Before he would answer. There's people that's an extreme case, but there's people that are very uncomfortable if they don't understand everything. They get caught up on that one word. They can't just see the big picture. They get caught up on one thing and they want to know what does that one word mean? What did you just say?
Yes.
And like we were saying, when you're kind of just talking and, sometimes teaching, you just kind of talk, and you're not reading a script. You don't know exactly what you just said. It can be tricky.
Yes.
Or doing a podcast interview.
I don't know. So, but for my daughter, so she entered the 3rd grade here. The way Italian schools are, at least where we were, is the age cutoff is January 1st to December 31st. So she finished the 3rd grade in Italy. She's a November baby. So here she's doing the 3rd grade again, not because she needed to, but because that's how the birthdays fall, which is a blessing because she gets an extra year of the language. I think they go on to like the middle high school at grade 5. So she has another year with the language, which is great. But she's in that age where kids are really starting to become socially aware and forming groups and things. But she got really lucky. We live in a small town. That probably helps. But she got really lucky finding friends very quickly. One of them speaks English. She's not native, But this girl speaks very fluent English because I asked her how, and she's like, oh, I just learned it. I just started listening and talking.
Oh,
wow,
man.
that's amazing.
Little
So she
polyglot
has,
in the making.
someone who she can really communicate with at a good level. And then the German, but her teacher this year has made the biggest difference. Her teacher is amazing, patient, doesn't expect too much of her, but does push her and encourages her. And that makes a huge difference. So my daughter's learning that the social German, she's getting really good at impressively. And academically, she's doing very well too. Yesterday, they had a vocabulary list and I was supposed to dictate it to her while she wrote them down. And Italian, which was her first written and reading, I guess you could say, language, it's phonetic, relatively easy, minus some double letters and a few weird sounds, right? Super easy. German is not at all phonetic in the way that English isn't phonetic. So she did all of them. She only made like 2 small mistakes. This is a list of 20 words. I said, that's amazing.
That's great.
And they just got these words last week. I'm like, how do you know all these? She's like, oh, we just write them a lot. They include it in different ways. So this teacher has different methods for teaching the kids the words. And I was amazed. And then she knew what most of them meant in English. And they've only been going to school since mid-September. So this is a huge difference. Her confidence is different. You know, it's better than when we started in Italy. Her social anxiety is non-existent as far as I can see. I'm sure at school there's still issues, but
there's always issues, right?
Yeah.
But shout out to the amazing teachers out there.
Gosh, goodness,
makes a huge
difference.
Such
a difference. And so our biggest challenge right now is speaking anything at home besides English. My husband speaks English. Of course, it's our common language. I don't. In Italy, I expected myself to be able to speak Italian at home because that's the message I was getting from teachers. Well, do you speak it at home? No, I don't speak it. Right. I'm a beginner. And they would still, well, that's what you really need. That's what you really need to help her. And I got stuck on that before thinking I could just reach out to other people. And there's other ways to get this extra immersion, play dates, going to friends' houses, things like that. The pressure was on me and me specifically to do this, and it didn't work. So here I have completely realistic expectations. I know what I can and can't say. I know that even in pandemic, we can still go out. She can still have some play dates with friends and do homework together. All of that's fine. Oh, and here in Germany, the school day is over at either 12:05 or 12:55, depending on the day. So even a regular full school day is not
really
a lot of yes.
What?
It's particularly strange to me. That's the school day. So there's
up until what age?
I feel like forever because I see kids like middle school age kids getting off the bus. They're the local bus, not a school bus, the regular town bus at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon sometimes.
Interesting. I know in France, they have starting in middle school more of a college schedule, like what we would have, where you have an 8 o'clock, you have a 10 o'clock, and you have a 2 o'clock, and you're free to do what you want in between. Whereas US schools are like a prison. I felt like that even as a teacher. You are here from 7 to 2. You do not leave the building. You cannot leave the premises. You can't go to Dunkin' Donuts and get a coffee. Like you have 4-minute break. You can barely use the bathroom and make it back to your next class on time. It was that's why I left high school teaching, because it was so rigid and so prison-like, and you just rush all the time. And then I don't know, it just doesn't feel like a good environment.
So get this, the school day is 7:45 to 12:55, but she doesn't go those hours every day. She goes those hours one day. Other days she'll go late at 8:30 because they don't have a first class, or she'll come home early at 12:05. So this is like the school hours, but that doesn't mean every class is going to go during all those hours. And last week,
it's hard to plan by though, because if you're a parent, you have to go to work.
The number of alarms I have in my phone for what time she needs to wake up, what time she needs to leave the house, what time I need to wait for her to walk home.
That's kind of confusing. And I like the freedom aspect, but like maybe older, middle school, high school.
Yes. Last week, they informed us that the gym class, they had to cut 1 hour of gym. I think they had 2 or 3 hours. Now they have to cut 1 hour. They just cut that hour off the schedule. So instead of coming home at 12:55 on Wednesdays, she comes home at 12:05. And I was like, you don't fill that with something else?
That would never happen in the US.
It's the weirdest thing to me.
Never. I can't even imagine that.
Yes. So access to German just from the school. She's not going to learn it to a high level, just school. And that's totally fine. no problem, because now I have this realistic expectations that help guide that along the way.
Super important.
So, I'm learning German myself. I started about a year ago on my own. I still work on it daily. I'm going to a class at our local, I don't know what you would call it, like trade school, I guess, maybe.
Okay.
Going to a class there. So I'm learning it. I'm comfortable listening to it for the most part. If I overhear conversations, as long as they're not super deep, I can follow along. So having this comparison with Italy, where I was floundering for so long, to hear where I'm more focused, and German is more similar to English than Italian is. So there's that aspect.
But I think it's that you know kind of the process, how
to
do this, you started.
Mentally, I'm not freaking out. Those things. So being able to find ways to incorporate it at home without just putting them in front of Netflix all the time is the biggest challenge.
We can't just put our kids in front of the TV and hope they
need German time. Here's Netflix, watch a show. My son will do that. And my son, we moved here, he was 5, just barely 5, like a week after turning 5. And he said, you're going to learn German. You're going to go to the German school. He's like, okay, cool. He's like, my next language is going to be French. And after that, Portuguese. And I was like, I didn't even know you knew that French was a language.
I love your son. That's so cool.
So sometimes I'll put on Netflix. I'm like, okay, you have to watch a show in German first. Can I watch French? Sure. Do you know anything? And then all of a sudden one day he's like, un, deux, trois. And I was like, you're learning from this. This is crazy. Cool. So yeah, he's going to be some little polyglot who speaks who knows how many languages, because he's
already got the desire. That's great.
So anyway, incorporating it at home. And just for me, because my biggest challenge, and here's another, comparison to other families or other parents, is, there's all the different types of learning at home, the OPAL or time and place, all of that. None of those really apply to us, because I don't speak either language at such a high level that I can, or that I feel comfortable. And my daughter wants to keep her Italian because she has friends. We just have to find time to video chat with them. Right. And she and I can read stories in Italian together, and we laugh and we watch video on Instagram. Sometimes I found a hilarious one the other day that they want to watch every single night, and we just laugh, and it's in Italian and she's getting it.
What are they doing? What's so funny? I have to know. Or you need to share it with me.
I'll send it to you. It's a guy making a phone call. Here's how you talk on the phone in Italian. It's a short conversation. And at the end, they're like, ciao, 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 ciao.
I saw that one.
It's hilarious.
Yes. You posted. I think you posted it.
Yes.
But that's how people
really is exactly how you end a conversation, like a million chows. And so my kids just think it's hysterical. So things like that.
That's so cultural, though. They know that. They know it's funny because they lived in that culture. That's great.
Exactly.
My kids have a favorite video for French too. So I'll post both of these on Instagram, so people that follow us.
Yes. So finding other content that isn't sit down and study this and let's go over vocabulary and things. I can read books in German to my kids. They probably understand more of it than I do, but my pronunciation is okay enough that they don't yet correct me.
That's great. That's great that you're doing that.
Yeah. And that's the stressful part, though, is when we moved here, my Italian was probably a low intermediate. I've probably gone back down to a little bit high beginner. No problem. I know it's just something that'll work itself out as I keep moving forward over the years, but it's not such that I can have a big conversation with my kids, because even I'm stumbling over words or forgetting things, which works nice with my daughter. That's kind of a relationship building. She reminds me of a word. I remind her of a word. And now it's just this thing we do together, because she doesn't have the pressure of school Italian. But it's that paving my own way, talking to other moms who are American expats who are kind of dealing with similar things, and they want to learn the language. That's like a whole kind of maybe subculture of this parenting multilinguals children, is not only am I not native, speak either language at a high level, I don't speak another language already. So there's all these other layers of, I just have to find what works for us and talk about it with other people, see what ideas they have, and just keep pushing forward to be able to support my kids. And
you're so right that we don't really, we talk about the 4 big categories of how to do it, assuming you're a native. That most I think bilingual parenting is assumed you're a native of the language.
Yes.
Okay, you're not a native. Maybe you speak it proficiently. So then there's the non-natives that speak a language, good enough, but we don't ever talk about those parents that, okay, I'm raising my kid multilingually, but I don't even master the language yet.
Yes.
There are a few people I know on Instagram I can point you to. There's a mom raising bilingual kids in Japan, and she's learning Japanese, but she's an American mom. She's like, I don't actually speak Japanese. I'm like a monolingual here, but my kids are learning Japanese. So there's definitely, it's like a sub culture in this multilingual community. And maybe we just, I know people are out there, and maybe we just don't have enough publicity, enough accounts that are well known circulating about it.
Yes. And there may not even be enough of us to make loud enough noise about it, because I was trying to figure it out for so long by myself, not even knowing there was a language learning community, that I finally got to think, like, how many other people are out there, and we really have an expat bubble that I didn't even know that was a phrase. I just knew I didn't have a need to learn Italian. And we spoke English basically everywhere we went. I could go to the doctor or the supermarket and speak English because I had access to that. And all of our friends were English speakers. And I just remember thinking, this is a problem. This is part of the problem of why I'm not learning, but yet it's so comfortable. It's comfortable.
It's so nice here in my bubble.
And in the beginning, when I spoke no Italian, my friends were Italians who spoke English. They took on that burden of the language, and they loved it. So I can't really say burden, too tongue in cheek, really. But that's what it was. All of my friends spoke, even my best friend now, she speaks English to such a high level. She learned it in, throughout school and up through university, that we've always spoken English. And sometimes I finally started sending her WhatsApp messages in Italian.
Nice.
And she was like, I didn't know your Italian was so good. I said, because we could always speak at a deeper level in English. It would have been nice to talk to you in Italian, but we will never get down to all the deep stuff that we want to talk about if that's the case. So
I think the expat bubble is such an interesting topic because it exists for sure. I saw it in France. So it exists for sure in Europe with like the American, you easily find other American expats anywhere you go. But it also exists, in the US. I know there's lots of little bubbles where, for example, my in-laws can do everything they want to do in Polish. They work with people that speak their language. They know where to shop. They know where to get their glasses, where to get their, someone, a realtor. You can find, lawyers. You can find anyone you want to find because everybody's connected. Everybody will suggest you to, go to this person if you need this thing. So it's not, I don't know. It's like it's a love-hate relationship where like, it's such a good thing that they can do these complicated things like going to a lawyer in their native tongue. I'm not against that at all, but like you said, it doesn't help you learn the majority language. So adult learners, like we're talking about with you, like if you're an adult moving to a foreign country and you can do everything in your native tongue, where is the incentive to learn?
Right. Well, like I said, my husband didn't learn Italian while we were there for 4 years. He's not learning German here. So much of it has to do with just his time. And like I said, passion. I knew I was going to learn German. It's happening. Done. But for him, he's like, I'm working all the time. And when I'm not working, I'm commuting. Where we live is a bigger city. So the commute is ugly and he hates to drive. So when he gets home, he's just exhausted. I'm like, just do Duolingo for 5 minutes a day. And he's like, yeah, no.
You can't push that on someone. Yeah.
No. And that's definitely true. So, and I know so many Americans, especially in Italy, who learned a little bit. If their kids weren't going to the Italian school, most of them didn't. They didn't have to. And I mean, it's a privilege to live in another country and not have to learn the language, for one. Just being aware of that, I think, is incredibly important. But expecting someone to learn a language just because they live there, I don't know. It's not necessarily feasible for everyone. If you're only there for 2 years or 3 years, then I mean, it's understandable. It's nice to be able to say the basics. I think most people just pick those up anyway. The expat bubble thing to me comes back to just your self-awareness. Like I said, when I got very clear about my goals for my daughter, knowing what we wanted for her in Italian, what the real goal was, and it wasn't to make perfect grades in school, then everything became more clear and easier to do.
You could let everything else go.
And it's the same thing with the expat bubble. Once I got clear that I don't want to speak English all the time, I started going out and buying my meat. So I can go down to the butcher in our town that is a closer walk and order my meat there instead. It's making those conscious decisions to get out in the town And here in Germany, it's almost harder because so many people speak English at a high level.
So well. Yeah.
They respond to you in English, consciously continuing to respond to them in German, even if they're speaking to me in English, to the amount possible, is difficult. But you have to be very self-aware, have the desire, really, and not every day too. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing thing. I'm totally an all or nothing person as a perfectionist, but realizing that today I can go down and get my bread in German. They can respond in English, and I'm going to keep talking in German. But tomorrow I'm tired. I fought with my kids in the morning. I don't have the energy. That's okay. I can go have that interaction in English on that day. And it doesn't make me any less of a German speaker. It doesn't make me any less of a language learner. It's just in that moment, this is what I need to do. And that's fine. And then the next day I can do it a different way. Like being so self-aware and understanding of your own limits and your own boundaries and your own emotions and mental state is what really helps push forward and make the decisions to speak the community language whenever is right for you, and the decision to speak your native or whatever other language when that's right for you. And all of it is okay.
It's such a acceptable, touchy topic too, because just, I don't know. It's so hard. It's so hard to learn a language as an adult, to get over the fear of speaking.
Oh yeah.
Different topics, there's just so many things I could say, being self-conscious, making mistakes, not wanting, people not understanding you, things that you mentioned earlier. It's such a touchy topic.
One of the biggest things that's helped me within this transition in particular, getting out of Italy, where I had I already had my vulnerabilities and they still crept up all the time, to Germany, where I'm just simply moving place. And so my mindset is different. One of the biggest things that has helped me is getting very clear about what counts for me. Ordering food in German counts, even if I'm just reading the menu. Asking where the toilet is counts. Where in Italy, I'd be like, oh yeah, these are just easy things. They don't count. Is it in English? No, then yes, it counts.
It counts.
Am I reading one post on Instagram in another language? That's reading. That counts. And especially as a parent where we have no time, those little things add up. And every time we have the opportunity to access the language, to touch it in any way, if I personally say that counts for me, I don't have to read a whole book. I can read some newspaper, not even articles, just the headlines, and see how much of it I understand. That counts. And so when I started doing that and tracking it so that I can actually see progress along the way, it became a completely different journey that's more exciting and more progressive than if I just said, oh, well, but that's easy. That those words don't count because I already know them.
You were diminishing your work.
Exactly.
And also that reminds me of somebody, I think my friend Reiko, so she's doing she did the Target language challenge where every month she read a book in one of her target languages. And she said to me, like, well, you read your kids' books in Polish. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like it was like an aha moment, because I was like, I read Polish books all the time and never counted them. I don't put them on my Goodreads because they're books for kids, but that totally counts. And I was like, oh my God, I never even thought about that as counting. Tell us more about how you track, because when you were mentioning that, obviously I'm part of this community and I follow lots of people who are language learners and that are not parents. And they have these meticulous tracking where they know to the minute how many minutes or hours they spent learning their multiple languages. And you see these beautiful charts, and they've already read 3 books this year, even though we're 3 weeks in their target language.
Right. I have in English
a year. And I'm just like, where do you people find the time to track all of these minute details? So please tell us how you as a busy parent track.
So I just started that this year when we moved, because I knew I wanted to track my language. My goal when moving, in the process of moving, which is a long process, as you know, and for us, it took a very long time to get into the house and then get the kids registered for school and then get them to school. And
it's a nightmare. Let's not talk.
So my goal was to touch my languages every day, be it reading, writing, speaking, didn't matter. Just touch them every day. It could be Duolingo, which I don't play Duolingo. I use Duolingo. So that's different, right? But I just wanted to touch them. But how am I going to really know if I did that? Because easily you could get by 3 or 4 days and be like, did I do anything? I don't know. I don't remember. So I had to track it. So I created my own in like PowerPoint. It was pretty, it worked. But then I started having to print them. I wasn't opening my laptop every day. So I discovered Notion and created my own there, where I have one tab for German, one tab for Italian, and it has just a check mark for my favorite apps that I like to use, which I realize I don't use often enough, but that's okay. They were free except for one that I paid for that I really love. So if I do whatever app I do, I just put a check mark, and there's an app. So I don't even have to go to my computer to check this. I can just open up my phone. We all have our phones all the time, right? So it's there at the end of the day or at the beginning of the day. I can say what I did yesterday. Then I have it open where it just says speaking, reading, writing, listening. And then I have, I guess, things that I can put in there, just check off social media. Have I sent a message? Have I read something? Have I listened to something? Speaking. Oh, I haven't spoken Italian in a few days. I try to have italki lessons every week. It doesn't happen. I'll send an audio message to one of my friends I haven't spoken to in a while.
Like me.
On WhatsApp, right? Yes. Reading, for me, it all depends on what counts. For me, it can be a kid's book to my kids. It can be my daughter's homework. I have to read her German homework to try to understand what's going on.
True.
It can be headlines in the news or something. And so I have all these things broken down. Listening, of course, podcasts, even music for me counts. So I have that. And then I can just open it up at the end of the month and say, yes, I did touch each language every day. And I can see where I felt like I was touching it a lot. On weekends, I do less because my kids are home than I do during the week, and really decide, like I said, what counts and be proud of all of that touching. So that's how I track my official, I guess you would say, language learning. And then there's other things like I wanted to learn the Italian subjunctive last month. That was my real goal. I know when to use it, but I didn't, which that's the hard part, is knowing when to use it. So in my Italki lessons, I would be like, I know I'm supposed to use subjunctive here, but I don't know it. So this verb, and keep going. So finally I said, I'm just going to learn it. I opened up a resource, found subjunctive, learned it, and wrote that down in my tracker, just to show that I did it. And it was 5 minutes. It wasn't anything where I'm sitting down and I'm writing it. And then later on, I purposefully found sentences where I needed to use subjunctive. I would just send friends an audio message saying, hey, I hope that you had a good Christmas. I hope that you had this. There you go. Now I'm using it. And so it's a lot less stressful than one might think it would be for this, this specific thing, and then using it. So that's my main tracking. When we moved to Germany, I had the goal of speaking German to, I think it was 12 people. And I had hoped to do it by the end of July. I think it was August or September when I finally did it. So in my phone, I had just a note where we moved into our house and we live around, all of our neighbors are retired. So there's a lot of old women who just wanted to come by the house and ask all about us. So I knew where I was from, how old I am. We have kids, they're going to school. I could say all these things in German. And every time something like that happened, which was really often in the beginning, or if I ordered food or something, I would go to my phone notes, write the date, write a quick note about it, neighbor, asking where we're from. And that was it. So when I got to 12, I was like, I've had 12 small conversations in German. Look at that. If I hadn't done that, again, I would have diminished it. Well, I was just talking about myself. I was just ordering food. I was just asking for the toilet.
Especially what you're saying is so important, because when you're first learning another language, the first thing you need to say is like, hi, my name is, this is, your age, kind of that basic introduction. And I did the same thing with Italian. I wrote down like a basic intro. And I think I mentioned this before, but when you join the duo events, oftentimes people ask, like, dove abiti, like, where do you live? And you end up saying kind of the same thing over and over.
Yes.
But that's great. Even if you have to say the exact same thing to 12 people, you've now practiced saying, and like you said, you would totally diminish that as just, I only said
basic.
a few sentences about myself. Yeah, it's super basic. It's A0 level. Like you could easily diminish that. But I think it's really great that you had this idea to track that you wanted this many people. That's so cool.
And the big one was I forgot my house key. My daughter, they walk to school here from a very, very, very young age. Like it's a big pride thing for parents for their children to walk to and from school by themselves. I was not used to that at all. So the first day I walked her to school, picked her up, I'm the only parent there that's not driving their kid. So after about 2 or 3 days, I'm like, we live really close. I can just step out into the street, which is a tiny town, there's no cars, step out into the street and watch her walk. And then eventually I got to where, okay, bye, see you later. So the one day she was going to leave, my son was crying. So I picked him up and we walked out into the street, and I realized my house key is inside. The door locks on its own. Our neighbor next door, a sweet older lady, has our spare key. And I said, okay, I know how to say key, but I can do better than that. I know how to say forgot and key. Oh, wait, I just learned the perfect the other day. I can say I have forgotten my key. Wait, key is masculine and this is in the accusative. I could say I have forgotten my key, grammatically correct. And I stood there on the edge of the street thinking this through for, 1 minute, maybe a minute and a half. Instead of just freaking out and going right to her and saying it, I formed the sentence, went to her and said, I forgot my key and I'm so proud. And she responds, she gives it to me. And then she responds, put it in the post office box. I didn't know post office box. I said, what is, and then I repeated the word that she said, because I wasn't expecting her to respond. I was expecting her to say, okay. And then that's the end of the conversation. Right. So she responded with a question, and I had the right frame of mind because I already wasn't freaking out. I had the right frame of mind to say, I don't know this word. What is this? And she said something about her to say newspaper in German. I said, I know that word. Now I know what you're saying. So, that was the biggest, that's I think, conversation. And again, if I hadn't been tracking it and paying attention, I would have been like, oh yeah, I did that thing, but it was huge. It was a very, very big deal. And especially for confidence, because that's really what it's all about, is just staying in the right frame of mind, keeping your motivation, keeping your confidence, knowing when it's all going down, your confidence, and finding little ways to bring it back up.
I love that you set the grammatical correct. I need to use the accusative. It's masculine. How do I feel that with Polish though, like, how do I form the right? So people who study languages and cases will know what we're talking about.
It's beautiful. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. I love the German language. I love how it sounds. I love how it's grammatically structured, but it does add an extra layer of difficulty to an English speaker who doesn't have gender and art cases.
Yeah, the cases
very
are
specific
a whole
sentence structure.
And are you happy that you did Italian first? Do you feel like that was a good ease into language learning as an adult?
I always loved German. I remember watching, in Kentucky, where I grew up, we had English. That was it. I started learning Spanish in high school when I was 16. That was my first access to public education Spanish. So, I could do really good in class. I could memorize vocabulary and stuff, but I couldn't speak for anything. So I just said, I'm not a language learner. I just can't do it. I'm not that kind of person. But I remember watching like World War II documentaries with my dad, and they'd have interviews and they would always say a few words in German before dubbing it over in English. And I was like, oh my goodness, it's so beautiful. I love that language. Love it. But I never thought to learn it really. That just wasn't something that I had access to in my mind. And my husband, we've been together since 2009, and his parents are native German speakers, but they spoke English at home his whole life. And so I've only known them as English speakers until recently. Now, like, I'm trying to listen to them, trying to engage in conversation more, like, oh, look, I can say this.
That's so cool. I didn't even notice.
I know. Well, and he doesn't speak German. He grew up in the States, and so they spoke English, and his dad taught German, but it was something that they didn't force on their kids. They could learn it if they wanted to. So when I met him, I said, oh, your parents speak German. Well, now I'm going to learn. Now I have this motivation, but they speak English. So I really didn't have the motivation. I bought a book. I listened to the CD a few times, life got in the way, and I stopped, but I still always was fascinated by German. I didn't take German in high school because everyone said it was just so hard, and I wanted to make all A's. That was my goal, was not to learn a language. It was to make good grades. And if it was hard, well, I shouldn't do that. So yes. So Italian turns out is really, really hard, really difficult as a first language learning as an adult. It's gorgeous. I love it. But there was no, the pressure came from the situation around me, but not from this idealistic thing. Like German was this idealistic, really difficult language, and Italian didn't have that. In fact, I thought Italian would be easy because I remembered a little bit of Spanish from high school. That was not the case either. But
yeah, so we don't talk about how hard Italian is. I feel like there's this misconception that, Italian, it's easy. And then you suddenly start learning.
As soon as you start getting it, then there's something else to learn, right? Or for kids' books, all of the kids' books I would read are in this verb tense that in the North is not used verbally. So I
Mm-hmm.
can kind of recognize verbs, but I'm not going to use them in this way. So that's,
French has that
just,
as well. They have this
yeah.
special literary
Mm-hmm.
tense, and all the kids' books are written in it, but you would never say it. But it's
Right.
like just a literary tense. So it's probably
So
similar.
different.
Mm-hmm.
So moving here, obviously this is the opportunity to learn German. And now I really have the motivation, and going back to the States for Christmas and visiting my in-laws and chatting with them on FaceTime, I can start using a little bit here and there, and then seeing their face light up because,
Yeah. What's their reaction to that? That's so cool.
I mean, so my mother-in-law really, she speaks German when she needs to. She's totally comfortable. I mean, they've been there for decades. So they're both they have no accent at all when they speak
Mm-hmm.
English. So that's their language that they really speak at home, even to each other. But my father-in-law taught German for many years as well. And he's very much an intellectual academic type person. Also, he went to school, on his own for many years, getting master's degrees. He taught high school for a long time after he retired. So my father-in-law is an academic too. And so he's very excited for me to learn on an academic level. Like he has all these books and you have to see this and you have to see this, you have to read this. And when I speak to him, he's happy to correct me, particularly in a teacher kind of way. Like he knows me well enough to kind of know how I react to things, and he's picked up on that. So it's like a new level of bonding, really.
Yeah,
to
this
learn
is
it.
cute. This reminds me of you with your daughter.
Oh yeah.
Correcting
Absolutely.
her, and now you've got the other
Absolutely.
generation of your father-in-law correcting you. It's
yes.
So cute.
And it's fun too whenever we're around them, of course, which isn't often, but we were able to go back over the holidays. So they received some letters in the mail from German or Austrian relatives, and I could read it and be like, oh, I kind of know what's going on here. Wait a second. What does this mean? This sentence structure, I don't understand it. Oh, because it's in another case that I am only relatively familiar with. So everything could be a little learning experience. Oh, what's the word for that? I could hear conversations and say, oh, I know what they're talking about, but it's in a non-stressful environment, not immersed where I have to learn. And so yeah, I mean, the whole thing, he's really, really excited for me to learn and very supportive.
It's cool how languages can be a bonding factor as well.
Absolutely.
So you've mentioned with your daughter keeping up with the Italian, and now with your in-laws. And I feel the same way. I can't even count how many hours were spent kind of teaching me Polish.
Yes.
With my in-laws, it was kind of like a bonding factor. Like, oh, well, let me teach you some things. You know nothing about this. Let me teach you.
Yes.
But it's definitely a bonding experience.
It is. And it can go just as deep as, being interested in someone else's culture and life, just sharing in that. Or like I said, he's an academic. I'm an academic. We both love learning. And so we share that. And it just so happens that I want to learn something that he has studied himself, that he has taught. So there's so many layers to that. It's beautiful. And it does make it a lot more fun.
For sure. That's awesome. All right. I would love to hear an expression, maybe one in Italian and one in German.
Let's see.
I don't know if you have
I should have thought about this more. Well, so my favorite, oh, I don't know. Oof, this is hard. I mean, you can't have a favorite Italian expression. My real favorite Italian idiom is in bocca al lupo, because, for anyone who doesn't know, it's like break a leg or good luck that we would say
literally?
in English. Literally in the mouth of the wolf. So the first time I heard this was like, I know bocca and I know lupo. What in the world are you saying? So that was a fun one. I adore it. And
it's useful.
It is
all
useful.
The time.
my other favorite Italian word is allora, because you can't tell Italian without allora. And
allora.
Funny story going. So, my husband says allora all the time, but he says it in a like, oh, well, kind of way. It is what it is. And I'm like, that's not how it's used, but that's how many cute. Americans in our community there use it, because they just hear it all the time. They think it's just oh, well. That's a common misconception. But of course, you hear it all the time when someone is just starting to speak. They're about to say something that is the beginning of, I want to give you this lecture on why you should be behaving. So I start with, okay, allora, here we go.
Let's get started.
Let's get started. So my daughter, 4 years old, she'd been going to the preschool for, I don't know, a few weeks or a month or so, I don't know. And she came home and she's like, I think I have a girl in my class whose name is Alora. I said, no, baby, you don't. And she's like, yeah, the teachers say it all the time. This girl must be getting in trouble all the time.
Oh, it's so sweet.
No,
Oh.
that's just a word. What does it mean? It doesn't translate at all.
Yeah, it's
But
like there's so many ways to translate it.
Yes. I love that word. In German, I don't have a favorite yet. I guess I just love listening to it. I love trying to pronounce long words. Yesterday on Instagram, I was doing Speaking Tongues podcast 365 writing challenge for the year. And, I'm kind of in and out. Finally, it's what are you currently reading? I said, ooh, I can do this one in German. That's easy. So I wrote it in German, and I'm reading the sixth Harry Potter book to my kids in English right now. So I said, okay, what is Half-Blood Prince? I went online and looked it up. It is literally Halb-Blut Prince, literally Half-Blood Prince, but it's all one word. And I think that's beautiful. The way
it is beautiful how German.
And then it's intimidating to see these crazy long words, but when you understand prefixes and suffixes, because you can make a word even longer by adding a suffix and then making it plural and feminine, it makes it longer. But when you understand enough to just break it down, it's so beautiful. It's so fun.
And logical,
and very logical,
the typical
logical.
German logic, but it's very logical when you look at the chunks of words and oh, well, of course that makes sense when beautiful. You add it all together.
Yes. I think
I love your love of the German language.
I do. The first one that really made me laugh was glove or mitten. I'm really not sure which one is a Handschuhe. It's a hand shoe, literally is the word for glove. It's a hand shoe. And that's cute. A turtle, I'm probably getting this wrong, but a turtle is like a shield lizard or something. I would have to look it up. It's a shield, some other
shielded
animal.
Lizard. Yeah, that makes sense.
Something. I know I'm getting that one wrong, but they're fantastic. Those translations. I love them. They make me laugh. Great. And it makes it easier to remember. When you see something, you think, oh, that translates to this. That's funny. You'll never forget it.
It's like a mnemonic device. Yeah.
Exactly. It's its own built-in mnemonic device.
So Heidi, I could keep you on for another hour, but I know you need to start your day. We'll just have to have you back on the podcast at some point.
I would love it.
Tell the listeners if they want to know more about you, where can they find you? I know we've mentioned you and I are on Instagram. So where can we find you? And I will put links to everything into the show notes to make it easy.
So on Instagram, I'm love.joyandlanguages. I have a blog. It's not very active, but I have several things I've written over the last year or so, and it's lovejoyandlanguages.com. And this year, hopefully next month is the goal, I am releasing my podcast that will also be called Love, Joy, and Languages. My last name is Lovejoy, so it kind of goes all together very nicely. And I'm going to talk about, of course, language learning as a parent who's non-native and not fluent or advanced in a language, and expat experiences.
We need more. We need more people to talk about this. This is great.
And also my personal story includes that we didn't really touch on so much today, but includes so much perfectionism and how that has hindered my language learning journey, and how I've worked on overcoming those perfectionist tendencies that can bog you down so much. I'll be talking a lot about that. So look for that. If you follow me on Instagram, I'll be putting it out there, and hopefully in the next couple months.
Perfect. Heidi, thank you so much for being a guest today. And thank you for accommodating me with this difficult time. I know you had to wake up early. It's a little bit easier for me to stay up late, but my brain is starting to fade. So thank you so much. I look forward to having you back on the podcast, and I look so forward to hearing your own podcast and following along with that. So
thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It was extremely fun.
So fun. Yeah, we could, like we said, we could stay on for another hour.
Forever. See you later.